This week saw a planned budget tabling in Parliament fail to take off, according to the Finance Minister. One of the deadlocks within the GNU is a proposal to increase VAT that was contained in the budget. Now, to discuss the possible impact of a VAT hike on Labour, I'm now joined by Nedlac constituency head, Thulani Tshefuta. Thulani, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. A 2% hike, will that fix the budget? Or, as many are saying, will that break consumers? I mean, what difference do 2 percentage points make?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Thabo, and the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. And thanks for the opportunity to discuss this very, very interesting and volatile item in our national discourse currently. It is important to note that a budget is not on its own, by its own, for its own. The budget is essentially the allocation of resources to fund the commitments that were made in the State of the Nation by the President. And so at the point when those commitments are made, there must have been a plan which answered the question of where and how are we going to get resources to support these commitments that we are saying we are going out there to announce as the government, and now the government of national unity, as you are saying. But what we want to start off from is actually the point that none of us, absolutely no one, should be surprised by these happenings, whether of differences of opinion on the budget leading up to a point where the budget presentation is actually postponed. No one should be surprised. In a democratic society where engagement is viewed to be meaningful, no one should be surprised, because primarily this is something that the cabinet could have done and done on its own, and it has done so in expression of differences. This is something that could have happened even if cabinet was agreeing and then taking the budget for presentation to Parliament. Parliament has the power to approve or not approve the budget. And so it could have still been done by the Parliament. There may be instances where cabinet agrees, it goes to present the budget to Parliament, and Parliament approves the budget. But still, the people and other stakeholders may still have a right to reject that budget and challenge its legitimacy in terms of responsiveness to the plight and the need of the people. So I think if we begin to internalize that as something that should happen when anything is identified to be wrong. Yeah. And so we believe that the proposal, as you have asked, of a 2 percentage point hike on VAT, we can say without any shadow of doubt is that it is mounting a pile of stones on the shoulders of the people who are already poor, unemployed, and victims of inequality, who would anyway not afford it.
Yeah, yeah. You've already articulated that, of course, the President in the State of the Nation address made bold commitments. Those bold commitments, it seems they require some tough choices to be taken in order for them to be resourced effectively and to be realized. Does Treasury have limited scope of tough choices to take in this particular instance? At 2 percentage points, others are saying will ultimately give Treasury 60 billion rands. There are those who are saying a stronger and more effective SARS can give even more.
That which we call the intricate balancing act in budgeting, Thabo, involves one, the variable of the sources of revenue. Balance that together with the expenditure choices that we want to make. Thirdly, add the variable of borrowing and debt. Fourthly, consider the item or the variable on fiscal sustainability. And lastly, macroeconomic stability. So all of those are variables that must be juggled to bring about a balance.
Yeah.
And so when we bring about that juggling and the balancing act, it still boils down to the choices that we have to make. And what we must argue, and argue very strongly, is that when choices are made, it cannot be the people and the poorest of the poor who become the first victim when there is scope of other avenues, including the question you are raising about why not invest some of the limited resources into the capacity of SARS, which SARS has proven beyond reasonable doubt that with the necessary resources and capacity, it can continue to generate and collect more revenue. South Africans are very law-abiding citizens. What South Africans have not been happy with is continued collection of tax into the national revenue, and they do not get services in return for that. When SARS has gone to prove and build the confidence of the people, people have been willing to pay. And so that is one of the avenues that must be considered. And so when that balancing act is done, it will definitely necessitate trade-offs. And those trade-offs must never start by compromising the plight of the people and the poorest of the poor, first and foremost.
Do you support the stance that, I suppose, from now what is called a draft budget was released later on in the evening anyway, of towing the commitment to macroeconomic stability as the correct one? Because it seems of all the, I think, four or so that you have counted, that one seems to have been prioritized a little bit more and still is being prioritized a bit more.
It will be a hollow and wobbling macroeconomic stability that does not place the people at its center. It will be stability that continues to benefit the few who are at the commanding heights of the economy in South Africa, and ultimately it will not be sustainable. That is why all talk about growth must be inclusive in nature. All talks about growth must be inspiring the active participation of the general majority of South Africans. South Africans, including the poorest of the poor and those who are in the margins of economic activity, must begin to have a claim on the economy and its growth and see the practical expression of that growth in the daily lives of the people. Anything beyond that is an academic exercise, which we believe and argue that it will not have a long runway before it collapses, because it does not have, or it is not embedded at the center and the plight of the people.
Yeah. I'm convinced that all major tax instruments have now been exhausted, and this is almost like the final trick that SARS can pull?
No. We're not.
Yeah.
Corporate tax.
I wanted to say, what other tax instruments do you think SARS can still use?
Corporate tax is not at the levels at which it should be as our contemporaries are, as South Africa, so there is room to maneuver there. That which many people refer to as a wealth tax can actually have a room to leverage a lot of income, tax income, especially from the speculative markets. Yeah. Because there it is money that is generated and never reinvested into productive sectors of the economy. Yeah.
But are you convinced, though, Thulani, that it will be harmless? Because there are those who are saying more corporate tax is going to result in money fleeing out of the country because businesses will just take their money where they're being taxed less.
So, if that is the argument, why is it that we have still not seen those increased domestic investments when that room for corporate tax has been provided for? In the speculative markets, it is profits that keep piling up and never invested back into productive sectors of the economy as you would in sectors like manufacturing. And so that should be the room, because that profit will end up in the private hands and pockets of individuals and thereby continue to exacerbate inequalities in South Africa. Yeah. There is room there.
The government is arguing that, look, it's not just the whole of 2 percentage points that we are suggesting here. This is also done in the context of some mitigating interventions, including government introducing spending support, including above inflation increases on social grants, an extension of the fuel levy relief, additional essential foods being added to items which are being zero rated for VAT.
That may as well be a zero-sum game as well, Thabo. Because you can't say to a child, I'm going to hit you so hard because at the end of it all, when you start crying, I'm going to hug you and hold you so tight and wipe your tears away and give you your favorite candy. It becomes a zero-sum game. We're gambling with the lives of the people who cannot afford that even now. When you say you are going to zero rate some of the products, you zero rate for those who can afford those in the first place. We're talking about the absolute majority of the people who are not in any employment, who do not know now, today, as we speak, where is the next slice of bread going to come from. Whether you zero rate the bread or not, it means nothing to them. They cannot afford to go and stand in the counter and get it. So zero rating it, in actual fact, benefits those who produce the bread, because for those who can afford, it means they will produce more and they will consume more, and then they get to profit more. And so it cannot be that when you address the plight of the people, you say, we have to punish you in this way. This is essentially squeezing life out of the poorest of the poor. There's no other way of putting it.
The argument that says, well, unless you put it, yeah, you are almost using a blunt tool where everyone is punished. But the rich, they consume more, so they are going to be carrying the brunt of the burden, as it were.
So this is where the argument about the fact that VAT is a regressive tax comes in, because the 15 or the 17% for a person who's sitting with R1 million is different to a 15 and or a 17% for a person who's waiting for a 3,000 rand or 4,000 rand monthly income. It hits differently. The person who's sitting with R1 million does not feel that effect. A person who is earning even much lesser, it actually takes more of that income which they already have. That is why our argument is fundamentally that unemployment, inequality, and poverty are the direct contributory factors to the already high and ever escalating cost of living. And we have gone on empirically to qualify and quantify what are the factors that lead to this rising cost of living. And it has been proven that electricity and sources of energy are one of the big contributors. It has been proven that transportation for those who work, including those who go and look for employment, is the second contributory factor. It has been proven that the third factor is food. And so once you introduce a tax instrument which is cutting across all those aspects, then it means you are not meaningful about the second a priority of the medium-term development plan on tackling poverty and the high cost of living. You can't say we will continue raising the cost of living and we're going to introduce mitigating factors that will keep it at a balance. That is a zero-sum gamble.
So the GNU will be deliberating again ahead of the now 12th of March budget presentation. What proposals do you think, as far as you're concerned, they should be considering on the question, where is the money going to come from?
Well, I'm not sure if they are going to have a meaningful conversation, more so because the Minister of Finance has actually said that people will continue to speak as much as they like. Budget is not going to be negotiated. And that is very, very unfortunate. It actually takes away the value of social dialogue in combining all our collective heads in finding sustainable solutions to our national challenges as a country. And we believe that that is the first attitude that must change going into those discussions, that we're not going to discuss discussions. You can say what you may, but this is what we are saying as the national treasury. That is the first thing that we believe should be the enabling environment for those discussions to be meaningful. Secondly, we believe that government must not cower on this. They must go into the room of corporate tax. They must go into wealth that is piling up on the speculative markets. We believe that we still have room for borrowing. The thing that we've picked up, though, is that the minister may have been tactical in saying, what is this a new funding going to support? And he listed predominantly consumption items. And we believe that included in what he said will be funded through this 2 percentage point increment are things that relate to Transnet, Oprasa, and rail infrastructure. And we believe that cost items and drivers like that should actually be part of the appetite for borrowing. Borrowing not for consumption-based items, borrowing for cost items like infrastructure that we know once we invest in, they are going to have significant spin-offs. Fourthly, we believe that there is still a lot of wastage in our public discourse. And if you nab those in the bud, you will be able to leverage a lot more money, including some of the areas of comfort that we can do away with and live without. We believe as well that resources that are wasted on corruption can actually also find their way into meaningful deployment in our national fiscus. And some of the items may not even need new money, but the repurposing and the reprioritization. The fact that we have been able to narrow our priorities of the medium-term development plan into those 3 priorities should encourage us to also follow suit, because the funds should follow the function.
Yeah.
In the sense that when you reduce the focus of the medium-term development plan into those 3 areas, the funds must then follow those priorities. And we believe in the scope of that, then we should be able to maneuver and do best with the limited that we have. And more so, we must continue to make a clarion call to the private sector as well to inspire foreign investors by leading with domestic investments from South African locally based businesses.
Thulani, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks for coming on. Nedlac constituency head there, Thulani Tshefuta.